Chapter 1. The Deathworlder Dr. Jake Morrison sat in his small office at the Galactic Medical Center on Kepler Station. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. His eyes were locked on the medical reports, scattered across his desk. Another failed surgery. Another patient he couldn't save, not because of his lack of skill, but because the operating room team had refused to work with him. The door chimed softly. Jake looked up to see his assistant, Maria Santos, standing in the doorway. Her face was pale and she clutched a communication device in her shaking hands. "Dr. Morrison," she said quietly, "there's an urgent message for you. It's from the Zephyrian Council." Jake frowned. The Zephyrians were among the most advanced species in the galaxy, but also the most fragile. They looked like beings sculpted from living crystal and flowing light, their translucent forms pulsing with inner energy. Their bones were so delicate that a human handshake could shatter an arm. Most Zephyrians had never even seen a human in person. They called them Deathworlders, a term that described beings from planets so hostile that survival itself shaped them into apex predators. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest danger rating known to the Galactic Union, the Q. "Zephyrian Council?" Jake asked. "Are you sure?" Maria nodded and handed him the device. The message began to play. A tall, graceful figure appeared in the hologram, its body transparent like glass, with soft blue light flowing through vein-like structures. Jake recognized them instantly. Healer Veltar, head of the Zephyrian Medical Council. "Dr. Morrison," the hologram said. The voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I know this request will seem strange. We have never asked for help from a Deathworlder before, but we are desperate." Jake leaned forward. "The Zephyrians never asked humans for help, certainly not someone like him." "A plague has struck our homeworld," Veltar continued. "It affects our nervous systems in ways we do not understand. Our greatest healers have tried every remedy, every treatment, every ritual. Nothing works." The hologram shifted, displaying images of Zephyrian patients. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he watched the beautiful crystalline beings convulsing violently, their elegant forms cracking like glass under extreme pressure. Disease causes seizures so intense that our bodies tear themselves apart, Veltar explained. "Our doctors cannot approach the patients safely. If we try to restrain them, we break. If we do nothing, they destroy themselves." Jake understood immediately. The problem wasn't knowledge, it was biology. The Zephyrians were too delicate. To physically restrain their own patients during a seizure, they needed someone strong enough to hold them still, but gentle enough not to shatter their fragile bodies. "We need someone who can survive direct contact with our patients," Veltar said. "Someone who can withstand the physical trauma of an uncontrolled seizure. We need a Class 12 Deathworlder." Jake's breath hitched. Class 12, the highest survival rating in the known galaxy. Only those born and raised in the most extreme conditions on Earth earned that classification. He was one of the few, and the only one who had ever agreed to treat non-human patients. "You are the only qualified doctor in the galaxy with a Class 12 rating who is willing to work with other species," Veltar continued. "We know that asking you for help goes against everything we believe about Deathworlders. We know you are dangerous, but our people are dying and you may be their only hope." The hologram ended. Jake stared at the empty space where it had hovered. Maria was still watching him, her eyes full of worry. "Doctor," she said softly, "you're not actually thinking about this, are you?" Before Jake could answer, another voice spoke from the doorway. "I hope you're not." Jake turned to see Dr. Lisa Hayes walk into his office. She was one of the few people on Kepler Station who wasn't afraid to work with him. She was also one of his closest friends, Lisa, Jake said. "Did you hear?" The whole station heard, Lisa replied. The Zephyrian Council's message was broadcast on every medical channel. Everyone knows they asked for you. She sat across from him, her expression serious. Jake, you need to think about this very carefully, she said. The Zephyrians have spent centuries telling the galaxy that humans are too dangerous to trust. They've convinced half the Galactic Union that we're violent monsters. If you go to their world and something goes wrong, it'll prove them right. Jake picked up one of the medical reports from his desk. It was about the patient who had died because the surgical team was too afraid to assist him properly. And, if I don't go, he said quietly, their people die. How is that any different from what's already happening here? Lisa sighed. She knew he was right. Even on Kepler Station, a place supposedly dedicated to healing and cooperation, humans faced constant discrimination. Patients requested non-human doctors. Colleagues avoided them in the halls. Every day Jake felt less like a healer and more like a tolerated threat. The Zephyrians have never let a human step foot on their homeworld, Lisa said. Not once, in over 300 years of contact. They're that afraid of us. Then why are they asking now? They both knew the answer, because they had no other choice. Jake stood and walked to the window. Outside, dozens of ships came and went in the vast docking bays. Traders, diplomats, tourists, medical specialists from every corner of the galaxy. But very few of those ships carried humans. Maria, Jake said without turning around, send a message to the Zephyrian Council. Tell them I accept. Maria gasped. Lisa shook her head. Jake, please think about this. If you fail, it won't just hurt you. It'll hurt every human trying to make a life in the galaxy. We're already barely tolerated. This could make things worse. Jake turned back to face her. And if I succeed? Lisa was silent for a long time. Then quietly she said, if you succeed and you might change everything. Jake nodded. Then I have to try. Jake watched in silence as the young Zephyrian writhed within the shimmering energy restraints. The figure's crystal body fractured more with every convulsion, fine cracks spiderwebbing out across their limbs and torso with every involuntary jerk. Streams of soft blue light, what must be some equivalent of blood, leaked from the fractures, dimming with each spasm. The patient's face, though alien, was contorted in unmistakable agony. They're destroying themselves, Jake murmured. Yes, Veltar said softly, and we are helpless to stop it. Our healing techniques rely on resonance, on the harmony between mind and body. This plague breaks that harmony. Our music is disrupted, our bodies follow. Jake took a step closer to the energy barrier surrounding the patient's bed. It buzzed faintly as it sensed his presence, like it was warning him not to proceed. Can you deactivate the field? Jake asked. Veltar hesitated. Several of the other Zephyrian healers behind the barrier shifted uncomfortably. You must understand, Veltar said, voice wavering slightly. Even now, they are dangerous. Not just to us, but perhaps even to you. This is not mere muscle spasms. The plague creates bursts of bioelectrical energy, seizures amplified by their crystalline biology. You may be strong enough to restrain them, but we cannot guarantee you will be unharmed. Jake set his medical case down and opened it. You called me here because I'm the only one who might survive that risk. Let me try. Veltar gave a slow nod, then raised a translucent hand. The energy barrier flickered and lowered with a soft hum. The moment the barrier vanished, Jake felt a rush of displaced air and sound. The patient's movements grew more violent, as if sensing freedom. The bed rocked wildly, and glowing shards flaked off the crystal body with each impact. Jake moved quickly but with precision, approaching the patient like he might approach a wounded animal. He spoke calmly, his voice low and rhythmic, hoping his tone might serve where words failed. The young Zephyrian didn't respond to language, but there was a flicker, Some tiny shift, as if it sensed his presence. Jake gently reached down and placed his gloved hands on the patient's shoulders. Even with a feather-light touch, he felt the thin crystal structure tremble under his fingers. He applied just enough pressure to still the spasms, not stop them completely, but absorb the chaotic energy. He braced himself as another seizure tore through the patient's body, and light flared from the cracks, but Jake held steady. Veltar and the other healers watched in awe. For the first time in weeks, the patient's convulsions began to slow. "I've got you," Jake whispered, unsure if the being could hear him. "Oh, you're not alone." After several minutes, the seizures ebbed. The patient slumped exhausted, light pulsing faintly within their body like a fading heartbeat. Jake carefully lifted them into a more stable position, checking the fractures, and applying a temporary stabilizing agent, an experimental gel adapted from human trauma kits, modified to adhere to crystalline surfaces. Only then did he step back. The Zephyrian healers stared at him in stunned silence. Veltar finally approached, slower than before, and looked at the stabilized patient. "None of us have been able to do that," he said quietly. "Not once," Jake nodded, his expression grave. "I think I can help, but I'll need a full biological analysis of the infected. Everything you've got, blood chemistry, nervous system maps, neurological resonance patterns. I need to understand how the seizures start, how they propagate, and how this disease is attacking your systems." "We will give you access to all of it," Veltar said immediately, "and anything else you need, supplies, laboratories, support staff." Jake looked around at the ward. Dozens more patients, dozens more seizures, too many for one person to handle alone. "I'll need human assistance," he said. Veltar's crystal form seemed to dim slightly. "That will be difficult." Jake nodded grimly. "I know, but you brought me here because I was your last option. I'll do everything I can, but if you want to save your people, you need to trust that not all Deathworlders are monsters." The room fell silent again. Then Veltar bowed, deeply, reverently. "I will speak to the council," he said. "Perhaps this is the moment to begin tearing down our walls." Jake looked once more at the patient, now resting, their light faint. "But steady. Let's hope we're not too late." The energy barrier flickered around Jake's arm as he reached through it, but he didn't pull back. He had taken calculated risks before, but this was different. This was instinct. He could feel the Zephyrin's hand in his, cool, impossibly smooth, almost weightless. But he also felt something else. Stillness. Moran's fingers twitched once, then closed gently around his. Her crystal body stopped thrashing. The light bleeding from the cracks in her skin softened to a steady pulse. Her eyes fluttered open, deep wells of soft blue light, and she looked directly at him. There was no panic, no rage, no trace of the violence that had consumed her only seconds ago. "She's stable," Jake said quietly, almost afraid to break the moment. Veltar was frozen across the room, his crystalline form glowing faintly with disbelief. "That's not possible," he whispered. "She was unresponsive to everything. Neural dampeners, energy restraints, nothing helped." Jake let go of Moran's hand slowly, watching her closely. She didn't relapse. She lay still, eyes closed, again like someone finally allowed to sleep after days of torment. "Two patients," Veltar said. "First Silmesh, now Moran. You touched them and the seizures stopped, the voices stopped." Jake nodded, thinking hard. "Veltar, when did the plague start?" "About 3 cycles ago," Veltar said. "Roughly 3 of your Earth months." Jake frowned. "And were there any major events right before that? New construction? Deep crystal mining? Any changes in the planetary network?" Veltar's body dimmed again. "There was an incident. A crystal fault opened near the north axis. We thought it was a natural seismic shift. The mining guild sealed it and moved operations, but not before the disturbance echoed through the network. Jake's eyes narrowed. What kind of disturbance? Veltar hesitated. The harmonics changed. A low-frequency signal began echoing through the crystal lattice. We dismissed it as geological noise. It wasn't noise, Jake said. You said the crystals carry emotion, memory, and thought. What if something woke up in that fault? Something that got into your network, not a virus of the body, but of the mind. Veltar's glow dimmed further in alarm. A psychic infection? Exactly. The plague could be a symptom, not the disease itself. Whatever this thing is, it's speaking through your planetary network, whispering into your people's minds. And when it pushes too hard, your bodies, delicate as they are, just can't take it. Veltar was silent, processing. Jake could almost hear the alien's thoughts humming like chords in a song no one wanted to hear. You're saying the infection is sentient? Veltar finally asked. Jake shrugged. Maybe. Maybe not fully sentient. Maybe it's just a signal. Or something trapped in the deep crystal, something trying to get out. But why you? Veltar asked. Why do the patients respond to your touch? Jake was quiet for a moment. Maybe because I'm not part of the network. Whatever's speaking through the crystals, whatever's hijacking your thoughts, it can't reach me. And when I touch them, maybe I shield them. I become a wall between them and the voice. Veltar looked down at his hands, light flickering softly inside. We have always feared your kind strength, but it seems your strength is the one thing protecting us now. Jake didn't answer. He was already moving to the next bed. There was another patient, a young Zephyrian child, barely half Jake's height. The crystal form was vibrating so fast that the energy restraints looked like they might fail. The child's light pulsed erratically, painfully. Jake didn't hesitate. He reached down and placed a hand gently over the child's chest. Instantly, the trembling slowed. The wild pulse of internal light began to steady. Jake could feel the energy through his palm, hot, chaotic, frightened. But it was retreating like a storm pulling back from a shattered coast. It's working, Jake said softly. Veltar's voice was tight with awe. This shouldn't be possible. Jake stepped back. We need a new protocol. I'll work with your uninfected staff. No physical contact from them, just me. We'll create a contact-based stabilization method, one patient at a time. If I can touch them, I might be able to suppress the voices, long enough for your machines and medicine to heal the body. And if the voice fights back? Veltar asked. Jake looked at him, jaw set. Then I fight. Harder. There was a pause. Then Veltar slowly bowed his tall, crystalline frame. Dr. Morrison. For centuries we have sealed ourselves away from the galaxy out of fear. But today your hands may have done what all our science could not. You've given us hope. Jake didn't respond at first. He turned back to the ward, watching the patients slowly shift from chaos to stillness as the energy in the room began to change. He could still feel the touch of the Zephyrians he'd helped. It wasn't just physical. It had gone deeper. For the first time in his life, Jake wasn't just a doctor from Earth tending to the sick. He was a bridge, a barrier, a shield, and something in the depths of Zephyria, something old and angry, was watching him now. He didn't know how he knew that, but he knew, and he had the terrible feeling that saving these patients might only be the beginning. Do more than that, it would make recovery impossible. The crystal network wasn't just communication. It was the Zephyrians' way of life. Their emotions, their thoughts, their very sense of unity depended on that glowing lattice beneath the planet's surface and stretching into the towers above. Without it, they'd be scattered, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They're not just attacking your people, Jake said grimly. They're trying to break your identity, shatter what holds you together. Beltar's glow dimmed in sorrow. The Zrikith knew our greatest strength. Now they aim to make it our weakness. Jake looked around the treatment center. Patients were still being wheeled in. The air shimmered with raw psychic energy. The room vibrated faintly, like it was alive with barely contained power. And at the center of it all stood a lone human, a dangerous anomaly to most of the galaxy, but now the only stable ground in a mental storm. "I need more humans," Jake muttered to himself. "Not just me. If I'm a psychic dead zone, we need more dead zones." Belter looked up. "There are no other humans on this planet." "But there are on the Endeavor," Jake replied. "Get me a channel to Captain Stone." Belter hurried to the communication console while Jake knelt beside a young patient who had just arrived, their body spasming in tiny jolts. As Jake rested a hand gently on the child's shoulder, the trembling slowed, then stopped. Their breathing normalized. "Quiet," the child whispered. "It's quiet again." The comm screen flickered, showing Captain Stone's face framed by smoke and flashing lights. "Doc, things are getting worse up here. We're taking fire from those alien ships." "I need volunteers," Jake said. "Humans. Anyone who can be spared. I need them down here in the central treatment facility. Doc, with all due respect, this isn't the time to be asking for ground transfers. We're trying to keep the ship intact." Jake leaned closer to the screen. "This isn't just about helping them. The Zeriketh are using the planet's own network to wage psychic war. They're breaking minds, not just bodies. But humans are immune. We can block it. I can feel it. When I'm near them, they get better. I don't know how or why exactly. But I think it's because we're naturally isolated." Captain Stone blinked. "You think we can disrupt their weapon just by existing?" "I don't think we are. I've seen it. We don't need to fight the Zeriketh with weapons, not yet. We fight them by being near the infected. Call it passive resistance. Call it a psychic countermeasure. I don't care. But if we can get even a dozen more humans on the surface, we might be able to stabilize hundreds, maybe thousands." Stone exhaled sharply. "All right, Doc. I'll send a shuttle with volunteers. But we can't spare many. We're stretched thin as it is." "Just send whoever you can," Jake said, "and make it fast." The screen went dark. Outside, another explosion rocked the sky. Dust shook from the ceiling. The crystal spires in the distance flickered, dimming for a moment before flaring back to life. "They're trying to sever the network node by node," Belter said. "We won't be able to hold it together much longer." Jake looked around the treatment center again. More patients had arrived. He counted nearly 180 now. The air buzzed with tension. Those closest to him were calm, but further out the seizures continued. He thought for a moment, then turned to Belter. "Is it possible to amplify me?" "What do you mean?" "Like a relay. You said your crystal network can carry emotions, thoughts. What if it can carry mine? Not my literal thoughts," he added, "but my presence, my isolation." Belter's crystalline skin pulsed a deep, thoughtful blue. "Theoretically, it might be possible. If we could calibrate the local node to replicate your psychic signature, yes, we might be able to project your null field further." "Do it," Jake said. "Use whatever tech you've got. We would need to link you directly to the crystal matrix. It could be risky, more or less risky than what's already happening." Belter hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." They moved quickly through the corridors of the medical center, now bathed in red emergency light. Patients moaned in distant rooms, their cries echoing like ghostly wails through the hallways. Explosions shook the walls intermittently, and Jake could feel the vibrations underfoot, like distant thunder. At the center of the building was a massive crystal chamber. It looked like the heart of the planet itself had been brought into the room. Towering spires of glowing latticework, humming with unseen energy. "This is the local conduit to the global crystal network," Belter explained. "Place your hand on the core." Jake hesitated for a second. Then he pressed his hand to the surface. Immediately his mind recoiled. It wasn't pain, more like overwhelming presence. He could feel it. Thousands, maybe millions of minds. A tidal wave of thoughts, emotions, desperation, and threaded through it all onto something wrong, a slithering presence, a static hiss in the back of his mind, a whisper of resist, fight, destroy. But unlike the Zephyrians, Jake wasn't connected. Not truly. He could see the voices, but they couldn't see him back. He was like a void in their system, a black hole in a web of stars. The crystal around him reacted instantly. The hum grew quieter, deeper, and began to stabilize. Back in the treatment center, patients stopped thrashing. Beltar watched the readings. "Incredible," he whispered. "Your presence is being mirrored across the node. Patients miles away are stabilizing. Their neural activity is slowing." Jake clenched his jaw. "How long can I stay connected?" Beltar looked at him seriously. "I don't know. This isn't what the system was designed for. You're not just resisting the Zriketh. You're absorbing part of their pressure. The longer you stay connected, the more strain it will put on your mind." Jake's head was already beginning to throb, but he didn't let go. "Then let's hold as long as we can." Through the window above, the first of the Zriketh dropships entered the atmosphere in a burning streak of red fire. The real battle hadn't even started, but Jake, just one human in a galaxy of fragile crystal mines, had already drawn the line. Jake adjusted the controls of the pod, his eyes locked on the enormous structure before him. The weapon wasn't just placed into the planet, it had become part of it. The dark crystal tree pulsed like a living organism, feeding off the energy of the planet's psychic network and turning it into something malignant. "I can't destroy it by brute force," he said into the communicator. "It's grown too, deep into the network. Blowing it up would damage the entire crystal system, and probably the planet along with it." There was a long silence on the other end. "So what can you do?" Alex finally asked. Jake looked down at the strange crystal relay device in his hands. Designed by Veltar's team, it was meant to interface his human neural patterns with the Zephyrian psychic network. It pulsed faintly now, responding to his proximity to the weapon. "I can try to overwrite the signal," Jake said. "If I get close enough, I can inject my own mind, my own absence, into the system, a kind of psychic null field. If the Zephyrians can amplify it from the surface, maybe we can purge the weapon's influence all at once." "You're saying you're going to become the dead zone?" Alex asked. Jake swallowed hard. "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying." From the surface, Veltar's voice cut in over the line. "Dr. Morrison, we're ready. We've synchronized the amplification array with your neural pattern. Once you make contact with the weapon, we'll boost your signal through the entire network. But be warned, this will be a one-way transfer. You'll be absorbed into the system." Jake glanced out the pod's window again. The weapon loomed, its branches twitching as if sensing his presence. "Understood," he said, starting approach. He opened the pod's hatch and stepped out into the furnace-like heat of the core cavern. His boots crunched on crystallized rock, and his suit's internal temperature alarm began to flash angrily. But Jake kept walking. Every step closer to the weapon made his skin crawl with static energy, like he was wading through a sea of invisible voices screaming in his mind. But Jake had grown up human. His mind was used to being alone, isolated, quiet. He reached the base of the tree-like weapon. The pulsing dark energy was stronger here, almost physical. He held up the relay device, pressed it against the structure, and took a deep breath. "Now, Veltar," he said, "activate the amplification." On the surface, Veltar triggered the array. A wave of energy shot through the Zephyrian crystal network, linking every crystal structure on the planet into a single lattice. Jake's consciousness, shaped by evolution on a death world, began to spread through the web like a pulse. Curve silence. The effect was immediate. In medical wards across the planet, patients stopped convulsing. The howling voices in their minds went quiet. Doctors and nurses looked around in awe, as thousands of Zephyrians who had been trapped in psychic torment suddenly fell into peaceful sleep. "It's working," Veltar whispered. "By the stars. It's working." Back in the core, Jake felt his mind being pulled outward, diffusing, spreading. He was becoming part of the network, not like the parasite, but like a counterweight. A silence so complete that it cancelled the noise. His last clear thought was of Silch smiling at him, then Moran reaching out through pain, then Veltar, trusting a human. Then Jake Morrison was no longer a single mind, but the stillness at Gi, the heart of a planet. On the surface, the Zrikith ships faltered. Their weapons systems jammed, their signals failed. Then, one by one, they turned and jumped into hyperspace, fleeing a planet that had become immune to their most powerful weapon. In the ruins of the medical complex, Veltar stood before a group of recovering patients and medical staff. The crystal walls no longer flickered red. The alarms had stopped. The war was over. "He gave everything," Veltar said quietly, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "But he saved us all." And deep beneath their feet in the glowing cavern at the heart of the world, a single dark crystal tree slowly crumbled into dust, purged by the mind of a Deathworlder who had become the planet's last and greatest defense. "I'm going to try," Jake said. "Veltar, are you ready up there?" "The crystal network connection is prepared." Veltar's voice crackled through the communicator. "But Dr. Morrison, we still don't know if a human mind can safely connect to our network." "Only one way to find out." Jake pulled on the environmental suit designed to protect him from the cavern's toxic gases and unbearable heat. Then he opened the pod's door and stepped out into the most hostile environment on Zapiria Prime. The heat slammed into him like a wall. Even with the suit, Jake could feel the temperature trying to cook him alive. The air was a lethal soup of corrosive gases. The pressure was so extreme that his ears popped with every step, his body fighting just to keep functioning. But he kept walking. Humans had survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions. They had lived in deserts where the temperature soared past 140 degrees, and in frozen Arctic zones that plunged to 60 degrees. His ancestors had climbed mountains too tall for easy breath and dove into oceans deep enough to crush steel. This was just another battlefield in humanity's long war against nature, and humans were very good at surviving hostile environments. Jake reached the base of the weapon. It was embedded in the rock like some grotesque parasite, a massive crystal, structure pulsing with malevolent psychic energy. He placed his gloved hands against its surface and immediately felt it. Dark thoughts, angry whispers, raw hatred, trying to invade his mind. But Jake's human brain wasn't like a Zephyrian's. The weapon's psychic energy couldn't quite take hold. "Veltar," Jake said into his communicator, "connect me to the network now." "Beginning the connection," Veltar replied. Jake felt a tingling sensation as the Zephyrian crystal network reached out toward his consciousness. At first, there was nothing. Human minds weren't designed for psychic linkages. But then something shifted. The network wasn't changing him, he was changing it. Jake's thoughts, individual, structured, adaptable, began to ripple through the network. Where his mental signature touched the crystal system, the malevolent signal from the weapon faltered, the whispers dimming. "It's working," Veltar exclaimed. "The patients in the medical center are responding. Their seizures are stopping." Jake could feel the weapon fighting back, lashing out with increasingly dark energy. But its psychic barrage, meant to break fragile Zephyrian minds, was just noise to Jake. His mind had been forged in the chaos of a death world. He could think clearly under stress. He had to. More patients are recovering, Belter reported. The effect is spreading across the planet. But Jake was nearing his limit. His body ached. The heat, the pressure, the mental strain, it was all too much. He had to end this. Jake reached into his medical bag and pulled out a compact explosive. It was originally intended for emergency field surgery, but it would do the job here. He attached it to the base of the weapon and activated the timer. "Belter, I'm going to destroy the weapon," Jake said. "When I do, push the psychic dead zone through the network. Amplify it as much as you can." "Understood." "But Dr. Morrison, the explosion—" "I know," Jake said calmly. "Just make sure it works." The timer reached 0. The explosion lit the cavern like a second sun, the shockwave echoing off the crystalline walls. Jake was thrown violently against the rock, the impact almost enough to knock him out. Any other species would have died instantly. But Jake's human body, dense bones, resilient organs, was built to survive trauma. As the weapon shattered, the psychic connection surged. Jake's mental pattern, his humanity, flooded the entire crystal network, eradicating the last traces of the weapon's influence. "All patients are recovering." Beltar's voice crackled through the static. "The plague is over." "Dr. Morrison, can you hear me?" Jake tried to respond, but his communicator had been destroyed in the blast. He was alive, but trapped, 12 miles beneath the surface of Superior Prime. No way to climb out. No way to call for help. But he wasn't worried. He had won. It took the rescue team 3 days to reach him. When they finally pulled Jake out of the cavern, the world above had changed. The crystal cities were glowing again, the towers singing, with light. The patients were healed. The plague had ended, and the Zerioth warships had retreated. Without the weapon's signal, their systems had failed. But perhaps the most remarkable change was how the Zephyrians now looked at Jake. Beltar greeted him in the medical center with a small crowd behind him. "Dr. Morrison," he said solemnly, "the Council has made a decision. We are requesting that the Galactic Union change your species classification." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, confused. "Humans will no longer be classified as Class 12 Deathworlders," Beltar said. "You will be known as Class 12 Protectors." Jake smiled around him. Zephyrian children played and laughed, their crystal bodies glowing with joy. They weren't afraid of him anymore. They didn't see a threat. They saw their savior. Young Silch approached Jake's bed, holding something in both glowing hands. "This is a healing crystal," she said carefully, speaking in galactic standard. "My grandmother made it for you," she added. "She says humans are not dangerous. Humans are gentle giants." Jake took the crystal. It pulsed warmly in his hand. For the first time since becoming a doctor, he felt like he truly belonged somewhere in the galaxy. His communicator buzzed. A new request. The Ethereal Collective needed a doctor experienced in zero-gravity surgery under high radiation conditions. Jake looked at the message and smiled. Being a Deathworlder had always made him different. Now he understood. Different was exactly what the galaxy needed. "Do you know anything about zero-gravity surgery?" he asked. Beltar's crystal body shimmered in a way Jake now recognized as laughter. "I think," he said, "that's a job for a Class 12 Protector."